Welcome into Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf here, going solo today. And OG Anunoby, rumored to be of interest to the Knicks by multiple reports. I'm getting into those reports, the statistical profile of OG Anunoby, how he might fit with the Knicks, and whether the rumored asking price is worth it. Next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And I am Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, and I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. I appreciate you guys making us part of your daily routine. If you want to make sure that you never miss us being part of your daily routine, hit the subscribe button on YouTube and the notification bell, or hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast app and hit the auto download episodes so you never miss one. But big news. No reason to hold things up here. There are two reports that have the Knicks linked to OG Anunoby. We're, of course, very close to the trade deadline at this point. So things are going to be heating up over the next week or so here. And this is probably the biggest name the Knicks have been linked to thus far, this trade deadline. First, we had Ian Begley of SNY, one of our good buddies, with a report. This was sort of mentioned in one of his videos. He said Anunoby with Toronto, I mean, that would cost you a lot. That would cost you significant draft compensation. Maybe the Knicks are there. Maybe they're feeling like they can make the playoffs and make a big push if you added an Anunoby. I know that they're reportedly contacted Toronto on Anunoby, and I was told in that conversation they offered multiple firsts, but this was a while back. Toronto has done a lot since then, but I don't think the league is crystal clear on what the Raptors want to do on Anunoby. And then Shams from The Athletic reports the Knicks and Suns are among the interested suitors in Raptors forward OG Anunoby. Sources say New York has shown a willingness to offer multiple first-round picks for Anunoby, according to those sources. So, interesting stuff. Both mentioning that the Knicks are willing to offer multiple first-round picks, which might sound scary on the surface, but in case everybody needed a refresher on what the Knicks have to offer here, they have a pretty interesting little multitude of first round picks available to trade at the moment. So I'll just give a quick refresher on that. Currently, they have the Mavs 2023 first round picks, this coming draft, top 10 protected through 2025. In which case, if it doesn't convey by 2025, it would become I believe, a pair of second rounders. I don't think that's going to matter. I'm pretty sure it's going to convey this year. I think the Mavs are going to make the playoffs. As of right now, it would be the 17th pick in the draft. I think you could probably chalk that in for somewhere between the 16th and 22nd or so pick this year. So that is almost definitely going to convey as like a mid to mid late first round pick this coming year. They have the Wizards 2023 first round pick. Now, these next three are all picks that they got from their draft night finaglings this year, when they were, they offloaded Kemba Walker and through a series of moves, sort of also offloaded Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel. Of course, cleared the space for Jalen Brunson and got these protected first round picks back, as well as trading out of their own pick in the first round this year. So the Knicks ended up with the Wizards 2023 first round pick. That pick is protected through the lotto for this year. So that's picks 1 to 14 that it won't convey. Then 1 to 12 next year, 1 to 10 in 2025, and 1 to 8 in 2026. If the Wizards have not conveyed a first round pick to the Knicks by 2026, then they get the Wizards 2026 and 2027 second round picks. Then the Pistons, they have the Pistons 2023 first round pick as well. That pick is protected 1 to 18 this year. So extremely unlikely to convey this year, given that the Pistons are one of the worst teams in the league right now. 1 to 18 next year, probably not going to convey next year as well. 1 to 13 in 2025, 1 to 11 in 2026, and 1 to 9 in 2027. So that pick is tied up for a long time and basically banks on the Pistons at some point around Cade Cunningham getting better Kate Cunningham, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey. You would hope if you're a Pistons fan or Pistons organization member that they'll be better sometime by, you know, like one of those years, 2025, if they make the playoffs, hopefully, or 2026, something like that. So otherwise, that one, if it does not convey by 2027, just becomes a single 2027 second round pick. Then the Knicks also have Milwaukee's 2025 first round pick protected, picks 1 to 4. And if that falls in picks 1 to 4, New Orleans gets it, and the Knicks get nothing. But more than likely, considering Giannis should still be alive and well by then, uh, the Knicks will get the Knicks or whoever has that pick will most likely get it because it's very doubtful that the Bucks in 2 years' time will be picking in the top 4 of the draft. Then the Knicks, of course, own all their own picks going forward. So that's 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. I think they can go out to 28 right now if they were to make a trade, if they so choose. I don't think that they would choose to do that because that would be reckless compared to what the Knicks usually do, especially under the Leon Rose regime here. Uh, just to give some basic stats on OG Anunoby so far. Well, you know what? Let me just first talk about. I'll do the stats in the next segment. Let me just talk about how I think he would fit. First off, I like the fit. I think that he's a really good target for the Knicks. I think that he maybe is a better target for what the Knicks could become in a post Tom Thibodeau world. I think that if you can somehow hold on to Obi Toppin in this trade and go forward with having essentially like if you can offload Isaiah Hartenstein and some other deal, perhaps, maybe recoup a little bit of draft assets, get a second round pick or two back for him. And you could roll forward with your big man rotation, essentially being Julius Randle, Obi Toppin, OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson, and Jericho Sims. I think you'd be in really good shape. Sims could provide you that sort of Mitch-esque look if you needed it, but then otherwise you could throw a guy like an Anunoby out there and he could play sort of a similar role to how Toronto has Scotty Barnes playing right now, which I have some great stats in a minute about why that could work. He's a pretty consistent three-point shooter at this point in his career. He's a guy that I think can work as sort of I don't know if I'll call him a glue guy. I think he's slightly better than just a glue guy. I don't necessarily know that I see him making a big star turn. Like Jalen Brunson, you could sort of see some writing on the wall saying, like, you know what, if this guy gets more of an opportunity, he might have a star turn in him. OG, you know what? I think it's best if I'll get into the stats in just a second because I think there's some stats that maybe suggest that he doesn't have a big star turn coming, and that maybe this cost that is rumored for him is a little overblown, depending on what it is. So why don't I take my first break real quick, and I can real quick remind you guys, and I'll come back and give a big statistical breakdown on OG, and then finally in the final segment get into what I think the Knicks should give up for OG, which obviously is the most important part here. But I thought about it quite a bit and have some good notes on that. But first, I just gotta let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And this year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on anything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. I'll tell you what, I got to look at the actual things that I can bet on for the Super Bowl, but if you've heard me give this read before, I'm going to look at some same game parlays. It's my absolute favorite thing. You can pick all kinds of different props for the Super Bowl. You can pick who's going to score touchdowns and when. You can pick who's going to score first. You can pick things related to the halftime show often. I mean, there's just so many different things that you could pick in relation to the Super Bowl. It's the most fun game to bet of the entire year. The FanDuel Sportsbook app also is safe, secure, and super easy to use so you can feel good about doing it. And best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. I've always been a huge fan of the FanDuel app. Quite frankly, even when we were paid to talk about other apps, I was using the FanDuel app. That's been my app of choice for betting for a while now. I'm glad I can finally publicly endorse it. So I would definitely recommend the app. It's super, super easy to use and super quick to get payouts. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/locked on to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. And now I am back to talk more OG Anunoby, and I've got some stats to get into. A little bit of stat dump here. So, stats this year for OG Anunoby. I'll just go over the basic counting stats first, and then I'll get into some interesting ones that I like a lot that make me think that he could be a really good fit as sort of a weird combo stretch big for the Knicks going forward, hopefully. So just the basic counting stats, he's averaging 16.9 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 2 assists. He is averaging a career high 2.1 steals and a career high zero point 0.8 blocks for the Raptors this year. None of the other numbers are career highs. He has averaged a little more points last year, I think was his career high. He's averaged slightly more rebounds before, slightly more assists before. But all in all, he's falling pretty in line with what he's sort of settled into the last few years as far as just the basic counting stats go. He's shooting 46% from the field, 37% from three, which is in the 56th percentile for wings. And he is shooting 82.1% from the free throw line. He's also shooting 63% at the rim, which is in the 52nd percentile for wings. You might remember from when Gavin and I did a breakdown on RJ Barrett recently, that's not that much higher than RJ right now, which is a thing. He doesn't quite draw fouls as much as an RJ Barrett. Like when I was looking up his on Clean the Glass, they have a bunch of great numbers, and one of them is like how often a guy gets fouled, and his numbers there are not fantastic. So there's some to be desired, whereas RJ is like in the top tier of getting fouled. So at least you can say like, oh, if his finishing isn't great, at least he's drawing foul shots. OG not quite as much. So that's a little bit of a worry as far as like star upside, because that's definitely a star skill is drawing fouls in today's NBA. He also only carries a 19.2% usage in Toronto. That's usage percentage, if you're not familiar, is basically a stat that shows how often a player is involved in the end result of a play, whether it's assisting a player or taking a shot. So, he holds about a 1/5 number, slightly less in Toronto right now, that he either is the person taking the shot or is assisting the person taking the shot. Not super high. Like your highest usage players are 25 to 30% typically. So kind of makes me wonder, like, I think a lot of him being available is that he seems to want to leave Toronto, presumably to get a bigger role somewhere. So there is a part of me that worries a little bit about whether he'd be able to find that in New York. I mean, lesser player, but we've seen sort of the same thing happen with Cam Reddish, where Cam wanted out of Atlanta to get a bigger role, and they came to the Knicks and got a smaller role, and now is back on the trading block because he wants out again, because he wants a bigger role somewhere else. Um, I wonder if there would be some issues there with OG with the Knicks. I guess the only way to tell would be to trade for him. So I guess we'll see what happens there. He is also one of only 5 players with a positive on-off on Toronto per Cleaning the Glass. 2 of those guys are Christian Koloko and Kem Birch, who don't really play too much. Koloko has around like 500 minutes this year. Birch has less than 200. Otherwise, of positive players in on-off differential on that team, it's just him, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, and Scotty Barnes. So pretty solid company there. The reigning rookie of the year and a potential all-star, all-NBA candidate again in Pascal Siakam, who had those honors last year. His last 3 seasons for Toronto. This is the big stat. This is the one that I like the most, because I think that the biggest selling point, other than the consistent scoring with OG, would be his defensive versatility if you want to bring him on. His last 3 seasons for Toronto, this is one of my favorite stats when it comes to judging a defender. B-Ball Index has something that they call a defensive versatility rating. And I've explained this before, I think, in relation to Mitchell Robinson and stuff during some offseason pods, but it's basically this number that they assign that's like a 1 to 100 number that it's almost like graded like a school paper, that gives you a rating that determines how versatile of a defender you are, meaning how well you can defend all 5 positions on the floor. Mitchell Robinson, if I remember correctly, scored something like a 70, which is slightly above average. Like an average defender is like a 50. Um, a guy that can only defend one position ever is a 20, because that's like 1/5. So if you're up in the higher echelons there, you're a very talented defender. His OG's last 3 seasons of this B-ball index defensive versatility rating, he has scored 90 plus twice on that scale of 1 to 100. And he's had multiple seasons where he's guarded all 5 positions on the floor well and for almost equal amounts of time each. So B-ball index actually shows you, like, based off some of their defensive metrics and film study and stuff like that, um, what positions a guy has been defending and defending well. And there are some seasons where OG, and granted, Toronto switches everything more and runs zones and stuff like that, but there have been some seasons where he has guarded all 5 positions on the floor admirably, which is crazy to think about. So he's a super, super versatile defender, which I think is the biggest selling point to potentially getting him. I think the scoring is just sort of the like cherry on top. It's not necessarily the big selling point. Like, I don't think that he has this star upside, but I do think that he has great defensive versatility, which would fit on like literally any team in the NBA and would especially fit on the Knicks, who could use another player that could potentially defend all the positions, especially I would assume you would probably move Grimes to the bench, so you could bring Grimes in off the bench and have OG and Grimes as like the super stopper duo. Throw quickly at the point guard there if you really need to get some stops, and like you might be cooking with gas. Like, that's a really solid lineup there as far as a trio that could stop the point of attack. OG also can defend around the rim a little bit. Like, he's averaging almost a block per game this year. He's very long, like pretty solid stuff that you could put together if you had an OG Anunoby on the team. And then as far as contract, he's signed through the 2024 offseason. He has a $17.5 million contract this year. Next year, it's $18.5 million. Then he has about a $20 million option for 2024 to 25. If I was a betting man on FanDuel, perhaps, I would probably say that he is most likely to decline that option and hit free agency in 2024, which, if you read an article that my buddy Jeremy Cohen wrote today for the Strickland, so go to strict.land if you want to read that, he actually made a pretty good case that the way the Knicks moves are aligning right now, it seems like they want to potentially attack 2024 free agency, which then if they had OG in their back pocket already and had his cap hold and could have him either as an emergency valve or as a guy that they sort of sign and then deal with some other guys, maybe not a bad place to be as far as the Knicks are concerned there. If they could get a guy like an OG that could potentially, be a guy that they want to re-sign in 2024, but could use a slightly lesser cap hold to then sign another player with probably an inflated cap. Then I think the NBA has another TV deal spike coming in the next couple of years where they're going to, do at least a partial renegotiation of a TV deal or something, and the cap should go up again. So maybe something to keep an eye on there. But of course, I think it's time to get to the most important part, which is what would I offer for OG Anunoby if I was the Knicks? And what's up with this rumored price of multiple first round picks? I think I even saw somewhere say that the Raptors were looking for 3 first round picks or something like that. So I'm going to get into that next in the final segment and give my asking price or my offer price for OG Anunoby. All right, so getting into the final segment here. This is how I wrote it on my notes. Is the rumor cost too much for OG Anunoby? Reportedly, those 2 reports I cited at the beginning of the show say 2 first round picks. So is that too much? Is that just right? I think it all depends on context. Are they protected first round picks? Are they unprotected first round picks? If Toronto is coming to me and I'm the Knicks and they're saying, well, we want your 2023 and your 2025 first round picks unprotected, I'm probably saying no. I don't think that that's a good price for a player like Anunoby, who is undoubtedly a really good player, but not a player that I think is game-changingly good to the point where you're going to start giving up multiple firsts for him. He's not an all-star. He's not a potential all-NBA player. He's not Donovan Mitchell. Let's put it that way. And there's no way that the Knicks should be looking to give up anything close to what they were rumored to be giving up for Donovan Mitchell, because That's just not who Anunoby is. He's not that player. Let me give a couple deals real quick that I think are much closer to what the market should be for Anunoby. Although I think Anunoby is maybe worth slightly more than these two guys, but this bears out with what I just said, right? So Malcolm Brogdon was traded. These are both trades from this offseason before the Jazz reset the whole market. So Malcolm Brogdon, 30 years old this year. He is a career 15, 5, and 4 guy who had the two best seasons of his career prior to being traded with Indiana. And he did struggle with injuries, which it should be noted, and I haven't even brought up yet. OG Anunoby also struggles with injuries. Like he only played 40 something games the last 2 years prior to this and has missed some time this year. I think just got injured the other day, actually, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, sort of similar, although Brogdon is obviously like 5 years older. So that's something to consider. But Malcolm Brogdon netted for the Pacers Aaron Nesmith, who has been sort of resurgent this year, but was looking like a bust before he went to the Pacers. Like he's revived himself. It is not like he went there as a highly touted prospect. Daniel Tice, who I thought about considering him part of salary filler, but he is an NBA player. He has shown something at some point in his career. Then salary filler, a few players to fill things out. And then the Celtics 2023 first round pick. They are the defending Eastern Conference champions and the top team in the East this year. So that's probably like the 29th or 30th pick. That is a glorified second round pick. If we're being completely honest, it's a second round pick with a guaranteed 4-year contract attached to it. So a valuable thing for a good drafting team. No, but not a super valuable piece. And for a guy that, is averaging like 15 points per game for the Celtics this year, but was like a 20-point per game player the 2 years prior, which is, by the way, a plateau that OG Anunoby has never had. He's never been a 20-point per game player. So something to consider there. Although obviously you get the big defensive uptick with OG. Then the guy that I think is probably the greatest comparison that I could come up with here, another guy that was just traded this past offseason, Jeremy Grant, 28 years old, so 3 years older than OG, but decidedly in his prime. Had two really good years for the Pistons in a row. Took Julius Randle to the limit in 2020 to 2021 for the Most Improved Player award, and just came off the two best seasons of his career as well. The Pistons, in their trade with the Trailblazers, they swapped second rounders in this year's draft, so the Pistons got a slightly better pick in that exchange, and then they, at least I think they did. I actually can't confirm that. Maybe they actually lost draft spots. I'm not totally sure. But then they got the 2025 top 4 protected Milwaukee pick that, funny enough, the Knicks own now, due to that finagling that eventually got the Pistons Jalen Duren. So if you want to say that it got the Pistons Jalen Duren, sure, you could put Jalen Duren in there. So like a mid lotto pick, and then 2 second round picks. So yeah. But they also had to trade that top 4 protected Milwaukee pick with other picks attached to make that whole thing work. So, and they also had to take on Kemba Walker's salary and other stuff too. Actually, I guess those other 2 picks came from Oklahoma City to the Knicks. Anyway, so essentially one protected first round pick from, again, a perennial top, we'll call them conservatively a top 3 lock, as long as Giannis Antetokounmpo lives and breathes. So, I mean, and 2 second round picks. So is that the market? I mean, that's another player that averaged 20 plus points per game. Jeremy Grant has proven, maybe not so much since he's been a focal point in the offense, like he was with the Pistons. Like that came with him being a little less of a defensive gadget player, but he's always been regarded as a really good defender, and just in general, like isn't in his prime player right now that averages over 20 points per game and got traded for just one lightly protected first round pick. That, by the way, if it does manage to fall in the top 4, does not convey. And like the Pistons knew that. So something to consider. I just think that those 2 deals are a much more reasonable expectation for what OG could be worth than like a Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell trade. As much as people want to talk about like, oh, the market is so strong in the NBA right now. It isn't. I mean, the Jazz broke up a perennial top 3 seed in the West to, you know, to tank essentially. And they got as many assets as they could. And granted, they've had some great reclamation project type guys like Larry Markkinen has been a revelation this year for them. But going into that trade, it wasn't so much about the players. They mostly just got draft picks. And like Markkinen, I think, was easily the best player that they got back. They have Malik Beasley, who's played pretty well from the Gobert trade. Obviously Colin Sexton. Like they got some decent pieces back, but the main thing of that was the draft compensation. And that was also the case with the Grant trade and the Brogdon trade. But like Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert are, I mean, Mitchell is a perennial all-star, a proven playoff performer as far as, just getting tons of buckets in the playoffs and being, a very reliable playoff scorer and performer. And like literally just dropped 70 points a few weeks ago, which I don't think OG Anunoby will ever even drop. Like I, I'll eat my words if he already has at this point in his career, but I would be very surprised if he's ever even come close to 40 points in his career to this point. So, you know, proven all-star, fringe, if not guaranteed all NBA talent with Donovan Mitchell versus a guy who has yet to take that leap and maybe won't in OG, or a guy in Rudy Gobert who, for all of his flaws, is a multiple time defensive player of the year, a perennial first team all defense, like one of the best defensive centers probably in the history of basketball, if we're being honest. Like, yes, he has had his issues in the playoffs with getting exposed against like teams that just switch smaller players onto him and this, that, and the other. But I think that he is undoubtedly I think that the Jazz got a haul for him and probably more than he was worth from a desperate team in the Timberwolves. However, much, much better player, much, much better caliber player than OG Anunoby. And it's not even close. And so that's where, I kind of just feel like I also don't think, and I said this before, and I've got a couple more stats here to support this. Like, I don't think that OG Anunoby is like a change of scenery away from making this like huge star turn that people think. I don't think that he's Jalen Brunson, where it's like we have indicators that say like, no, Brunson might be the real deal. Like if you just give him more usage and let him handle the ball more, like what has happened with the Knicks this year would happen. I so here's a couple extra stats that just kind of finish this off for me. So OG Anunoby is assisted on 68% of his shots. So that means that 68% of the time that he shoots, he's getting an assist from someone. I don't really buy him having the juice to do more than like some occasional creation for himself. So that's one thing. His least assisted shot. So if you look at his shot profile, he's like most of his threes are assisted. So he's not taking a lot of like pull up and self-created threes. A surprisingly large number of baskets inside for him are assisted. I think it was something like 70% or 60 something percent, which you would think for like a wing player, you would think that they would be generating a decent number of those themselves. The shot that he is least assisted on is from the mid range, which tracks. That's not usually a shot that you end up getting an assist on. That's usually mid range is sort of like that differentiator shot of like a star versus not a star, where it's like, can you create in the mid range? Because that might be where you need to get a bucket late in the game, because that's the shot that teams give you now in the modern NBA. So cool, great sign. That's where he creates his own shot the most, except for he is in the bottom third of wings in the NBA, converting those, shooting 35%. And as I mentioned before, he's also middle of the pack at drawing fouls. So I just don't see a ton of star indicators there for Anunoby, and that's totally fine. Like like I said, I love this dude as a player. I think he could be great on the Knicks, but I think that this framing that he's like a star available at the deadline is a smidge much as far as valuing him. So this is what my offer would be. I would say I would give Toronto options. I would say you can have either two of the protected first. So those four picks I mentioned earlier, right? The Dallas pick this year, the Wizards pick, the Detroit pick, or the Milwaukee pick. You can have two of those. Your choice. Whichever ones you think are going to be the most valuable. I don't care. Whatever. Or you can have the Knicks' own 2023 pick this year, unprotected. I'd be willing to do that at this point. I think we can safely say that the absolute worst things are going to happen for the Knicks is that maybe they end up in the play-in and end up with like the 14th pick or something. Okay, or 13th. We all know that. I mean, it would be like on the basketball gods to just be like, oh, well, you just missed the playoffs. Well, tell you what, this is going to turn to the number one pick now with like a 1% chance of doing it. That would be a thing that would happen to the Knicks. So maybe put like a top 2 protection on it or something. Um, but you know, you can say, hey, you can have our 2023 pick unprotected and one of the other protected first. I would probably try to lean them away from that Dallas pick just so the Knicks could still make a pick this year, but offer that up as well. And then Cam Reddish, and I think, you know, obviously Cam Reddish wants off the Knicks. He does fit the type, I think, that the Raptors tend to covet. He's like a long wing that has proven to be kind of versatile positionally and stuff like that. So they would probably envision playing him a little bit at the 4, a little bit at the 2, you know, whatever. So, you know, he's a very theoretical player right now. So they would probably be like, we trust our system to develop him. And then I would also include Derrick Rose for salary matching. And because honestly, Toronto after this move would still probably be making a push for the play-in. Like they do still have an in his prime Pascal Siakam. They still have Van Vliet. Like, you know, they still have a roster that could do something if you slot Cam in there and if you slot Derrick Rose in. And I think that Rose would probably take over for Malachi Flynn, who has sort of fallen out of favor in Toronto's rotation. Rose would give them consistent 3-point shooting, you know, a little juice off the bench that he's proven that he still has some of, and, you know, a nice load managed workload the rest of the way out. So that's my deal. That's it. So 2 protected firsts, or the Knicks own first this year, basically unprotected with a protected first. Cam Reddish, Derrick Rose. I think that's it. I think that's fair. I think that's fair based off of what the market is for a player like Anunoby. And I think that if Toronto wants to ask for more than that, if you're the Knicks, you say, we'll just handle this like we handled the Mitchell negotiations over the summer and say, you know what? We don't want to pay that. We're not going to pay the Knicks tax or whatever and give up extra just because you think that we should, or just because it's a division or whatever the case may be. I would just be like, yeah, who else is going to give you 2 first-round picks for this dude? And maybe the answer is Phoenix, as was rumored. If that's the case, say, fine, cool. Send him to Phoenix then. That's it. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't have too much more to say on this. So I'd be curious, you know, if you're on YouTube, if you want to comment about what you would give up for Anunoby, let me know in the comments. If you want to tweet at us or whatever, let me know. But this has been this edition of Locked On Knicks. We got a couple game recaps this week. Maybe I'll try to get someone else on to talk about this Anunoby thing. So I think this is probably going to be the biggest rumor we'll see about the Knicks during this trade season. But until next time, thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace out.